Good morning, guys. We're going to be starting our cell unit. So, to start us off on cells, before we talk about the nitty gritty details behind them, we're going to talk about how but scientists first discovered them. So, two major questions we're going to be addressing today are number one, what are cells? And number two, how were cells discovered? Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in all living things. So, if it's alive, it's going to be composed of cells. They're just the basic unit. When combined, they form that organism, right? Think about the human body. We talked about the skin, right? So, a single skin cell then forms like that skin tissue. From there, forms the entire integumentary or skin system. So compared to the size of a human body, cells are very small. A skin cell is 100,000 skin cells make up 1 square inch. Okay, they're really, really tiny, minuscule, tiny little microscopic guys. So cells were first discovered by Robert Hooke. He discovered them after forming a very basic microscope. You can kind of see it right here. So he built a really basic microscope using 2 lenses, and that was how he first discovered the cells in corks, of all things. You know, like the cork to bottles. That's how he discovered them. He took samples and he was like, well, what is this? Our next scientist we're talking about is Anton van Leeuwenhoek. He built a very simple microscope as well, and he discovered little one-celled animals or creatures. They're really, really tiny, and he called them animalcules. And he discovered them after finding bacteria. He took samples from teeth, and so he quite literally discovered bacteria, called it animalcules. We're going to learn pretty soon that they go by a different name now. 1595 was when the first compound microscope was made, and so that means that it was using 2 lenses. So instead of just like one glass that you're kind of looking through, having those 2 lenses allows for that closer focus of different organisms. And then in 1660, Robert Hooke invented what's known as Hooke's compound microscope. With that, that's where he discovered cells. Those cells being those little tiny cells that he discovered on a cork. In 1683, Leeuwenhoek invented a very simple 1-lens microscope, and that's when he discovered those little single-celled critters he called animalcules. So it took a while for the next major microscopic discovery to be made. So in 1866, that's when the first compound microscope with a stage, the stage is that little base part right there, and it had mirrors and objectives. We're going to talk in a great detail about these in like 2 days. This really opened the world to the microscopic world, where we really were able to make really amazing scientific discoveries that have led to all the new studies in medicine and cancer research. We'll go into this a little bit more later, but this is just your basic compound light microscope that really revolutionized the world. So next in 1933, that's when the electron microscope was discovered. That achieved a magnification of up to 500,000 times. So we're talking like we are seeing things we never saw before, and beyond that cellular level, we're going into like the molecular components of how things are made. But before we go into more details on that, let's look at some pictures of some cells. I've shown you guys some pictures of cells before in organisms, but mainly in humans. So we're going to kind of go through some fun little cells. This is Rotifera. Look at that, so cool. And we have plant cells. Now remember, plant and animal cells are going to have different makeups. This is cell division because our cells have to divide to form one new organisms, and then also be able to kind of like replace your tissue. So that's going to be the difference between meiosis and mitosis, which we're going to go over in just a couple weeks. Now, the next major microscopic discovery was the scanning electron microscope. The scanning electron microscope allowed for us to look at 3D images, so up to 150,000 times. But again, it was going to be 3D rather than flat, so we could really see kind of how that looks. Right here's a picture of a bug. I believe this one's an ant. And then right here, these are insects next to a tiny, like little kind of like a component to a computer kind of thing. This one's even more wild. This is an ant biting a computer microchip. Those microchips have gotten so small. And here we have a dust mite. These are pictures of bacteria. They have these little coils on them. So cool. These are spores on a thread. So this little like chain-like part, that's a thread. And then spores, like the things that cause allergies for Miss Hudson when she's sneezing like crazy, that's what this is. And then this picture is of penicillium. So if you are allergic to penicillin, like Miss Hudson, this is the thing that you're allergic to. Isn't that wild? That's what it looks like. And then this is a fly, because we just really need some fun pictures in here. And then I believe this one's a flea. Isn't it wild how much we can see now due to the microscopic world? So cool. And then this right here, this is a new microscope that was more recently made. This was in 1981. This was when the scanning tunneling electron microscope was formed. It had a magnification of up to 1,000,000. And so this allowed us to see the atomic level. So they're here in this picture, this is showing 48 iron atoms arranged in an oval. So this really opened our eyes into more cell discovery. That being said, the Lawrence Livermore Lab has some of the type... Sorry, that's about guys. The Lawrence Livermore Lab, it just pretty much in our backyard, has some of the top discovery of like microscopes and things like that. They literally have elements on the periodic table named after them, including Lawrencinium, like crazy. If you guys ever have the chance to tour the lab, coolest thing. Next, 3 scientists that have major contributions to the development of the cell theory we haven't talked about yet. Matthias Schleiden, he studied plants, and so he really was looking at plants under a microscope. And then Theodor Schwann, he studied animal tissues. His discoveries in regards to animal tissues have received him lots of honors, including with the nervous system. There are certain parts of the nervous system where we actually specifically named them Schwann cells after him. And then lastly, we had Rudolf Virchow, and he studied the division of cells. And so if you look at the picture here in this corner, this is cell division, and that's how those cells are being replicated. And we're going to talk about a lot of this in detail in literally just a couple weeks. Now, cell theory, on the other hand, is going to be involving all living things, okay? So the idea behind cell theory is that, number one, all living things are made of at least one or more cells. So if it's living, it's going to be made of cells. If it's not living, it's not going to be made of cells. Second, cells are the basic unit of structure and function. So that's pretty much just saying that cells make up living things, and they have a function, which is pretty much like to stay alive and keep the organism alive. Now, that kind of varies depending on how complex the organism is and what it needs to do, right? There's a difference between neurons and cardiac cells. And then lastly, all cells are produced from other cells. It's not just like magically, poof, the cells came into existence. Here we are, new organisms. No. Instead, we have cells that are going to mutate and change. And those mutations can lead to new organisms or can lead to other situations. We're going to talk about that more with genetics, don't worry. But all cells are going to be produced from other cells. All living things are made of cells, and it's ranging again from single-cell organisms to multi-cell organisms. So it can be anything from microorganisms, vertebrates, invertebrates, plants, algae, fungi, bacteria. You can come up with another one on your own. If it's living, it's made of cells. Now, cells are the basic unit of structure and function. Again, that's just saying like our cells, one, we're made of cells, and then there's different types. So like muscle cells, our body uses them to move. Its function is to move. Blood cells, your body carries that oxygen and distributes it to other cells, keeping other cells alive. And then sex cells are used to reproduce, aka make babies. Okay, all these cells have a basic structure, and then their function depends on like how complex the organism is. quick little fun video for you guys. It's going to be kind of going over the discovery of cells and kind of even more into the microscope. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, this one's going to be linked directly into the PowerPoint, so you do have to open up the PowerPoint to watch the video. Thanks, guys. See you.